A shibba dabba dabba doo, a skittle doodle dee doo doo doo. I
Is
didn't
there
put
not
music on this.
music?
There's no music. There's no music.
So,
I didn't add
so
music. It's just a clock
I
because
think
I
it's
thought we would continue to sing over it. Shabba
it
doo,
doesn't count down each individual one. It counts
shooba
down to
doo.
five.
No, because I made it, and I was like, "This is too hard."
Like you actually made it.
Yes.
Oh, you know, in my head. Oh my God. I'm sorry.
Oh, we're here. We're here.
Order in the court. Order. I
Oh,
said
oh,
order. I,
okay.
today, order. Welcome, everyone, one and all of ye subjects of this fine uh, country, to a incredible and special independent episode of Nobody Asked with the veritable Maria.
Oh, and that would be me. Hello.
Ah, and the presiding over these proceedings, which have been presided upon, but in the future, is the honourable and true Colin. Thank you for that introduction. You have been, I have never, what a beautiful introduction. Thank you, thank you. Of course, sir. So the show today, we will be talking about some things. Uh, the honourable and verisimilitudinous Maria has brought some things to the floor, and we will be doing a bit of a workshop session of a new bill to introduce to Congress. I think, perhaps.
Okay. Yeah, no, yeah, that's kind of the plan. Yes, let's do it. Let's do a workshop. I feel like I gotta make you louder. Here we go.
Is that the
E.
vibe?
That is the vibe. Yes. Do you know what? Just on a side note, when we discussed season 2 of this show, and you said you wanted to make a constitution and you wanted to wear powdered wigs, I was like, not 100% feeling it. But now that we have invariably landed here anyway, I understand. I understand why this is where you wanted to go.
Oh,
Oh my
well,
god.
hindsight, as they say, is the looking glass through which nothing is obscured.
Okay. I don't know. Like, should we get right to this? What do you want to do? How
Oh,
do you want to?
yes. Introduce the first and only topic, which is a workshop.
Yes. So,
I'm only
what I would
kidding.
uh, uh,
Good show, everyone.
procedures. Point of
I've,
order. Point of order.
I have, I've pulled a bit of a bit of a funny one on you. I, I have, oh, Bobby, I didn't know they allowed cats in Congress, but yeah, yeah, that will be the first deal. Okay, no, I have pulled a funny. Today's Congress has been sponsored by Wooden Teeth. Oh, have you had some difficulty with maintaining your dentures and your dental health because of all of the sticks and mud you've been eating? Have your teeth been falling out, and then you're like, where did that tooth go? Oh, oh, bother. Well, why not try wooden teeth? They're made of wood, and that shit's everywhere. So you can just put it in your mouth, and then when you lose it, don't fret. There's more wood around. The deforestation has not occurred yet, so it's all good. Wooden teeth.
Oh my gosh. Wooden teeth. That shit's everywhere. Yes.
Wooden teeth. That shit's everywhere.
That's what you said. You said
It's a,
it.
it's a bit of, we were talking about supply and demand curves recently, right? The supply is
Oh
massive.
yes. Surprise! Supply is massive. Use wooden teeth. Okay. I mean, we understand what that's about. Good stuff. Good stuff. I like it. Okay. So, to start this workshop. Oh, wait a minute. Look at this. Look what I made. just going to continue with me attempting to do things. Here we go. Boop. Look, I put a ticker on there. So
let's become rebellious and bill writers. Let's take back the power of our legislature. Should I not just be reading it out loud?
No, you can
This is
read it
our
out
news
loud.
bits, right?
Yes, we just read the tickers.
Who seems so committed. Give away. Oh, this is not proofread. What? Who do we lean on when our elected officials let us down? Ourselves. Oh, it was only the last sentence. That was good. Everything else is good. Let's become our own lobbyists and bill writers. Let's take back the power our legislators seem so committed. Give away.
Well, my tenses might not be perfect. I was typing when I couldn't see what I was typing.
Cory Book. Respond. Who would have expected?
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Well, right? He might have come. I do want to say this, initially we had planned to just kind of have this be kind of loose and for a longer period of time, but life has happened and we really only have an hour for this. So we're going to say this might just be part one of our workshop. And as I sat and looked through what an amendment looks like and what we want to do, this feels more like an amendment than it feels like a bill, to me, because it feels like we're preserving rights as opposed to limiting them.
Well, here, let me edit something then.
Oh, the amendment. Nice.
Sweet.
I like it. Ooh. And my ear itches. Sorry. I also want to say that I think almost every state has its own constitution, and so they can throw amendments on there too. So I do think shopping it around everywhere, in both state governments and in our federal government, is the move. That's what I think. We're just gonna send it to everybody. But that's just my feelings. I'm certainly open to thoughts.
Well, yeah, I think New York has already put through, just in a related thing, New York has already voted through to enshrine abortion in their state constitution. Now, I think it's a 1-year process to do so. But the good news is it doesn't seem like federally abortion is going to be challenged for at least a year. So it seems like that will be plenty of time to make it a state constitutional amendment. I don't really understand how the federal government applies to state constitutions. Do state constitutions still need to be federally constitutional?
I would say yes, and I think what it comes down to is what is it? Is it the third or the fourth? Where is it? Let me scroll through the old amendments here. Doodly doo doo doo. Nope, it's not the third. Nope, it's not that one. No. No. There's one in here that's kind of annoying, but it kind of... Okay, so it's number 9. The 9th Amendment says... Yeah, of the United States Constitution. It says the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage... Oh, no, that's not the one. It's the 10th one. The 10th one. The power not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So if we didn't make a law about it, then, or preserve your rights federally, then the states can do that, or the people can basically demand it for themselves. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to do. We're trying to demand it for ourselves. Assuming that I'm reading that correctly, because even though these are just like brief sentences, I feel like they're worded in the way that they're worded on purpose. Like that's supposed to give it more meaning. Does it? I don't know. Is that how you read it?
I think it's supposed to be getting to the spirit of the law, right? An amendment is more about evaluating other laws, right? So normal laws and bills will have an absolute ton of things to clarify small
Right.
discrepancies with it. But this is about like, and this is why I liked the idea of writing a constitution, is it's about setting in stone what the expectations and purposes of government are, and
Yes.
what things are right, are rights, right? And I love the idea of like, you know, one's right to freedom of speech just being like no clarifying anything, right? Just
Yes.
that's a right, and then interpret on the basis of that is one of the most important rights, right? And freedom of religion, interpret on the basis of that is one of the most important rights. And so we've spent a lot of time trying to determine where that line is. And the classic example is you can't scream fire in a crowded cinema, right? Um, the yeah, so it also makes it easier to write an amendment because we don't have to do as much text. So it's a win.
It is easier, but yeah, but then it feels like every word has to be important, and and kind of, I feel like ultimately what we're going for is really solidifying what privacy means when it comes to your personhood, or what personhood means. You know what I mean? Like, does the government have any say in anything that you do to your body, or into your family unit even? Because to me they're related. Your right to have a child, not have a child, choose who you have a child with, choose to not have a child with a person, you know that all kind of coalesces into a family unit. And then you can extend that into gay marriage and stuff. Like, your family unit is yours, and does the government have any say in that? Or should it? Should it be your right, you know, to control who is in your family unit?
What?
I don't know.
Oh yeah. So yeah, can you expand a little bit more on family unit? And then I think that one thing that we should make clear to the viewers is that we do want this to be a little bit of a back and forth. So as we're thinking about this and thinking about what is important to be in the bill, we do want to hear what you guys think as we try and figure out a couple of sentences that really hit on the head why this needs to be constitutionally protected. So can you talk a little bit more about this family unit idea?
Yes, I can. Hold on a second. I'm just going to add the link if anybody wants to come up. I realize we always have a very incredibly tiny crowd, but if anybody did feel like they had something they wanted to add, that I would, like them to be able to come up. So to me, I don't think anybody should have the right to tell you who you can and cannot marry, who you can and who you have to have children with, any of that stuff, which feels weird. But when you're saying, let's say you get raped, right? And you're saying that you now have to have that baby, nobody should make you do that. You shouldn't be forced to do any of that stuff. And listen, this is going to be kind of a probably a hot take and a not so nice take, but I do think when it comes to, let's say, you had a casual, fling with somebody, and you got pregnant, and you decided you wanted to keep it, and the man decided he didn't. I think that he should also have that same right to say, I do not desire to have a family with you. And so it's kind of interesting. That's kind of a weird one, you know what I mean? But I don't think that a man should be forced to. This is not nice what I'm about to say.
Mistake child.
Yeah, I don't think that they should. I think it should be a choice. Like, you have no rights or access to this child if you don't want to participate.
Yep.
But should you have to pay? I don't feel like you should. And I realize that's maybe not a nice thing to say, but I think that the world is changing. And if we want to say as women that we don't want to be beholden to a man, we don't want to be required to be part of a family unit to survive. We don't want to be, forced into marriages because that's how women, notoriously survived in life, was we had to find somebody to saddle ourselves to because we couldn't get a fair wage. We couldn't do all of these things that men used to have to be part of the scenario. Then we have to also be willing to release men from their portion of the scenario. You know what I mean? I don't know. Does that sound weird?
It doesn't sound weird at all. I think that a lot of people feel the same way about that. Um, the I, I, okay, this is actually kind of an interesting idea to me, and I don't know why I had never thought about it before. But we do sort of implicitly respect any individual's right to just separate. I mean, except for in the case of child support, right? Which it does seem strange that you can't separate, but you can give a kid up for adoption and then not be required to give child support, which is interesting. So the existence of the child is not the thing that requires that you give money to support the child. It's that the person that you impregnated wants to keep taking care of the child, which is which is interesting. Okay, the um,
I just wanted to
so
laugh at that comment.
I mean, I feel like we've hit like 20 different like
I know, and that's
independence
that's
arguments
yeah.
that say that, I mean, abortion should just be a right. I mean, and among them is, it seems strange that any parent, even though it's, terrible to abandon an actually alive child, we still allow parents to do that and to make that decision and to give their child up to foster care, and to the American system, and put it on, the American dollar. Right? We still allow that, and we don't punish it, except now in the case of abortions, you're required to take care of the child whether you want it or not, while there's some trepidation about whether or not it's alive. That's kind of interesting, I guess. I don't know,
Yeah.
it's not constitutional, but I like these ideas. I like the idea of trying to enshrine the right to bodily autonomy and privacy. And yeah, you can, like, weirdly enough, I mean, the first hole that I would have poked in it is that, like, well, you get to choose who your family is until you actually have a kid, but that's not even true. Even though it's terrible to, like, give a 10-year-old kid up to foster care, we still let that happen.
We do let that happen. We
That's
do.
interesting.
And
So you do
it
have that
happens in
right.
such a yeah. No, it's weird. Well, I mean, really, the whole foster care and adoption system in our country is incredibly broken and messed up, and it isn't about the child. It is about somebody's desire to parent. And so there's a lot of dishonesty in that, because that's always how it's been promoted. It's like, you can't have a child. Here's a child that needs a parent. Look, let's marry these two together. It works for everyone. Not realizing that it just doesn't work that way. You can't. Not everybody bonds with the child that they've adopted. Very often, they hate the child they've adopted, and I say very often. I'm just saying it happens too often, which is that it happens at all. And the children are put up on Facebook groups and traded amongst each other, and the child has no say in that, and it's super disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get adopted, your birth certificate is forever changed, and you are now attached to your adopted family, even if they hated you and you hated them. So I have a problem with that too, that you can never get back to your original birth certificate the way that the system is currently designed. And I don't know how we can enshrine any of that into this giant, personhood, autonomy, thought process in a single, but to me they're all connected to each other. And
right, so, sorry.
yeah.
My
But
my first thought of a sentence is, any individual can, without a reason necessary, determine those dependent upon them.
Determine
So,
what?
those that are dependent upon them. You, an individual, get to decide who your dependents are. A dependent cannot be forced upon you. You cannot be forced to provide for any dependents.
Ooh, man, that's a hard one, because what if you have, at one point you did decide yes, can you then revoke that decision later? Do you know what I'm saying? Because that's where.
What?
So let's say we're talking about having a child.
Yep.
We have agreed that we're going to have one.
Mm-hmm.
And now that agreement has taken place and the child is here, can I 5 years down the road say I no longer desire to be a dependent to this child and nope out of it.
I think we do allow that, right? I mean, we allow mothers to give their kids up for adoption, or to put them into the foster care system.
We do, but really we want them to give babies up for adoption. We don't want them to give children up that they've already decided that they've made a commitment to.
It's not about whether or not we want them to do something. It's whether or not they have the right to do it, right? I mean, just thinking about other rights, right? I don't want anyone to spread Nazi nonsense, right? But I do want them to have the right to spread Nazi nonsense because it's like important to a functioning, free speech democracy, right? In the case of this, we need individuals to be able to give their kids up for foster care. One, because if if we're going reality case, if your parent doesn't want you to the extent that they are fine with you being in the foster care system, the foster care system is probably better for you than them taking care of you.
I mean, the foster care system is not good for most. It's terrible. Nobody wants to be in the foster care system.
There's no question. But it's about a bodily autonomy question, which is just that, I don't know. We do have this idea that you need to take responsibility for your actions. But I don't know. I just don't get. I don't know if you get to have your cake and eat it too.
I feel like you absolutely can give up your 31-year-old.
Now we might want to put in there somewhere like, upon revoking your rights, or like, any individual status to you as a dependent, you can't like reverse that willy-nilly upon them. Like from then on, you need the buy-in of the dependent to rejoin that unit. It's
to rejoin. So you mean if they give it up, if they give up their rights and then they suddenly want them back, then the dependent has a say in the matter? Is that what you're saying?
Then it's about the dependent wanting back in, I guess.
This is very interesting, and this is like dangerous territory when you start thinking about it, because I think this feels wrong, but you can understand how it feels wrong based on the way that we operate as a society, that once you have the child, you are responsible for this other person, whether you want to be or not.
We feel that way, and in some significant percent of cases, that is the way things are and will continue to be after this amendment. But in terms of what we actually require of parents, this is closer to reality than the other thing. We require of fathers that split off from their families that they financially support the families that they leave. But when both units decide they don't want a kid, there's no repercussions, are there?
There's no repercussions. Like, I don't think that you can just drop your kids off at CPS. You can drop babies off at the and toddlers, I guess. You can drop them off at the fire station. Can you drop 10-year-olds off and 15-year-olds off at the fire station? Ugh. It's weird to think about. Oh, geez, I didn't know we were going to take this weird and interesting turn.
It's called voluntary placement. Voluntary placement. If your child stays in foster care for more than 30 days, there will be a court case about the placement called a 355A hearing, named after the part of social services law which requires these hearings. You will get court papers, which will give you a date for the case court. The petitioner has to include a notice that if your child remains in foster care for 15 months, the agency might be required by law to file a petition to terminate your parental rights. Okay, so that these cases are just to terminate parental rights. Can you at will forfeit parental rights? The only rights that are expected to you from a voluntary termination of one's legal relationship with their child is the possibility of a child support obligation.
Right, which is what Barbie said. My niece wanted away from her parents. Courts wanted them to pay child support.
Well,
So it's
that's about
interesting.
the niece wanting to leave, right?
Right.
Is it different if the parents want to
But
get
I
away?
don't know if that it would be. I bet the parents would still they would still want them to attempt. There'd probably be some attempt at trying to get child support from them because you brought the child here. You brought it into existence. It's your responsibility to figure out how to pay for it until somebody else takes that responsibility over. Oh man,
I
it is interesting.
Yeah, I don't know where I lie on this, right? Because if we go full bodily autonomy, then you should at any time be able to do, you know, be able to separate yourself from your responsibilities, um, in terms of another person depending on you, and then you lose the requisite upsides of having that dependent, like a relationship with them. But yeah, it becomes a struggle once we introduce this element of at some point you take responsibility for this person existing. It does become a little bit complex once we do that because then
It
you can
does.
see that encroaching on the bodily autonomy because I mean it would certainly mean that abortions should always be legal in the case of rape, right? But in the case of just an accidental pregnancy, I see any situation where you introduce the idea of responsibility encroaching on that sort of situation.
Yeah. No, I think we just have to find the right wording. Like we can put your sentence in there as a placeholder, but I will say that sentence makes me uncomfortable just because of
Yeah,
the word dependent. Yeah, Barbie, I don't know. The safe haven laws, in my mind, that was always like up to age 4, but I feel like that might be an arbitrary number that I put in there for in my own brain. But it is a good question. Um,
yeah. Or I guess they can't determine those dependent upon them. They can determine they can remove any dependent attachments or something. I don't know because obviously you can't say no. You are dependent upon me. That would be crazy. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's a hard question that I've introduced here. Now the reality is that if we just want it to be about abortion, like it can be about abortion. But as soon as we want it to hit on these like larger concepts of bodily autonomy that expand into abortion, I'm like, I don't know. We gotta be really careful with the language.
well, I'm partial to the offspring, right? Because that's the whole point is that you have they have sprung forth from you, and how would we? I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know. Where does the agreement begin with in terms of I'm agreeing to for my offspring to exist? Is there a handshake agreement that happens at ejaculation saying I'm agreeing to the outcome of this?
Yeah,
I don't think so, but I think some people would argue that there is, even though birth control fails, right? But it's like,
mm-hmm.
oh well, abstinence or nothing. If it wasn't abstinence, then you've made this agreement for this thing to take place. And I just don't subscribe to that thinking. I don't know. There's got to be
mm.
language,
Yeah.
and I guess
The idea of responsibility is really hard. Well, and we also want to enshrine because the concern that we have about the Supreme Court case is that they're nullifying this precedent of the right to privacy that was implied in the 14th Amendment. And so we want to enshrine that in some way, this right to
yes,
privacy, and figure out how to hit the right buttons so that it is clear that it's just not that if there are two adults who want to get married, it's not the business of the state to determine it. Or if there are 3 or
right,
4 or 20, I don't give a fuck, right? If
yeah.
they're adults
Let's
and they're all
let's
into it,
let's
give me
yes,
a break. Why are you involved in this? It's like the land of the free, but I really want to have a eyeglass into your bedroom. Stay the fuck out of my bedroom, okay? That's why I built walls around it. So I like I don't know. So that we want to enshrine that right to privacy in the right way, and say, look, any individual being free has a reasonable right to privacy when you know when making decisions with their own body and with whom they I don't know what's the word that encapsulates like with whom they have sex and marry and hang out with, right? Like with whom they
Okay, so
associate.
we're trying to define privacy then. Is that what we're doing? What
uh, that let's see that
or
okay, here I'm
what I
gonna
can do with yeah.
copy
Mm-hmm.
this so that it's still down here. Okay.
I
The
like your fun font.
uh, Yeah, it started out as like a SpongeBob joke, and now I just like it. Uh, to or
Your right to privacy in matters of your I don't know of your body and relationships. I don't know.
the right to privacy being an issue of individual freedom grants said individual uh,
The freedom from intrusion
uh,
into their personal relationships and the outcomes thereof.
that we also want to hit the what they do with their body thing, right? Like I don't any law that's like you can't pierce your scrotum is unconstitutional. Okay, and you can do anything with your body. If you want to cut off your arm, then
Yeah,
you
you
get to
should
cut
look
off
cut off
your
your arm.
arm. You should be able to cut off. That's crazy, right? But in America, we believe in your right to be crazy as long as it doesn't infringe on other people's right to be crazy. So I like to me, you lopping off your arm does not impact my ability to be crazy. So, uh, so we want the body thing in there. So it's like grants said individual freedom from intrusion, um, into their bodily autonomy. Well, why not just use the word that we've been using? Their bodily autonomy or personal relationships. The right to
Okay.
privacy being an issue of individual freedom grants said individual freedom from intrusion into their bodily autonomy or personal relationships.
I don't hate that sentence.
Boom, it's done. Send it to your
Done.
fucking congressman.
We've defined privacy. No. Uh, so I think I would also like to talk about, um, I guess, vaccinations because that was, you know, that happened, right? The last 2 years we've talked about vaccinations a lot, and bodily autonomy came up in the conversation for that. And
Yep.
as much as I don't want that to be a valid point of view, it is a valid point of view. I don't think that anybody should be forced to put things into their body that they don't want into their body, um, if there are other means available, right? So if quarantining is available, if personal protective equipment, if there's other means available to you um, to keep the public safe, then I don't think that a vaccine should be forced on you. I don't know the right way to word that, but you know what I'm saying? Because
Do I
that's more
agree?
about, but it's about the public health, right? No, you shouldn't be a victim of any public procedure that isn't about public safety, right?
and aren't vaccines are inherently about public safety.
They are. I know that they are, but I mean, assuming that there's no other options available. That they, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just saying that your federal government can't make you do it.
Well, I mean, can your federal government say if you don't do it, then you must use one of these other options, which is not seeing anyone until you get vaccinated? I mean, and do we get to try you
Yeah.
by law once you violate that shit? I would love
See,
that.
I mean, that's the way to word it. See, that's the question. How do you word that? Because that is still about bodily autonomy. But see,
Here's
okay,
what's
so
weird is that
this is hard.
we actually can, like the Supreme Court has ruled that vaccine mandates are constitutional, and yet there aren't any. Like there are no
No.
federal vaccine mandates. There are ones where you can't go to your job, but that sounds like it's in line with what you're proposing here, right? But what you're
Right.
proposing
Well,
is like, is protecting us from a thing that hasn't happened since the Spanish flu or polio.
I get. No, I understand. I understand what you're saying. I think that the way, I'm not going to say that the courts went, but the way the people that talk about this lean is that we'll let that the states or local municipalities where there's an outbreak that they can put these types of restrictions in place, but that the federal government can't. I think that's the way that it's been. I don't know, approached for the moment, maybe because nobody wants to make this a bigger deal,
I mean,
or because they.
I think if this was a 10 times as deadly virus, here's what I think would happen. One, I think that a lot of people that seem to be impossible to shut the fuck up would shut the fuck up. And I think that we would see definite and immediate federal vaccine mandates. And the thing is that I think it is necessary to have that tool available to our government because the fact that this pandemic
Forced
was
vaccines. Is that
not,
what you're talking about?
yes, this,
Okay.
well, and it's been used before. And that I think it's important to have that. And it's just like our hindsight on this pandemic, which was like essentially a practice round for a bad pandemic. It's like it killed people, it killed plenty of people, but this was a
Yeah.
good way of seeing what of finding the leaks in a real pandemic response. Uh,
True.
just because now we're thinking about it in the context of COVID doesn't mean that we shouldn't be thinking about it in the context of a virus that kills 25% of people, especially young people, right? Which is something we've dealt with in the last
Okay.
125 years.
But okay.
So I think we need that tool.
But what I think we need it too, but I think it needs to be used carefully. So I would say, you know, where public safety is a concern and no other options are effective. Do you know what I mean? So, like, if wearing PPE is effective, if quarantining, if isolation is effective, then you can, do that. But if it's not effective, then that would be the only time where it could be mandated, in my mind.
This is becoming a run-on sentences, a run-on sentence.
Well, we can put a period somewhere.
Okay, well then I'm going to put parentheses in and really just completely break convention. This is I am going to be absolutely set in stone that reasonable needs to be in there, because here's my thing, right? Is that here's how I would see something like the Supreme Court evaluating reasonableness, right? Is sure, if you are alone in your house all the time, then you're very unlikely to spread this virus, right? You're basically 100% unlikely to spread this virus. However, if the risk is, if you spread this virus, like 15 more people die, right? If that's the risk when you're unvaccinated, how many of those people that say they are going to not take the vaccine and they're going to isolate for the rest of their lives, how many of them are going to break that law? And how reasonable is it to expect that when you could keep a terrible virus continuing to rage through society because of some absurd, like, right to bodily autonomy in the case of a safe vaccine, right?
All right, hold
So
on.
this is
Ellie said,
where reasonable comes in.
do you think allowing forced vaccines opens the government up to take advantage of the idea that public health trumps bodily autonomy, and the AIDS epidemic is the first thing I'm worried about? Huh. That is an interesting one to look at, because people definitely freaked out during the AIDS epidemic. Is there a vaccine for that? Because that'd be great. But yeah,
There's not a
how
vaccine,
would
but I think that there was a, like, it breaks people's right to privacy with respect to their own sexuality, I think, was one of the concerns. Is that during the AIDS epidemic, there was like a requirement of reporting of your sexuality or like of your sexual relationships with other men. And that is, I mean, that does seem like a violation of a right to privacy, especially in a society where being gay can ostracize you. A responsibility to report your sexual relationships is intense. Um, I think that a lot of things open up a lot of doors, and we're trying to close
yeah,
as many unreasonable doors while not preventing
exactly.
a government from carrying out its duties.
Which is why I like these questions, because they start making you think about things in a different way. That's why we're workshopping, because we want to close as many holes as possible. So by identifying holes, we hopefully can close them. So yeah, no, that's a concern.
Well, and that's to me, that's where that reasonable clause comes in, right? It's because it gives the courts, as flawed as they may be, and we might need to change how courts work so that they better represent the will of the people, but it gives the courts the ability to evaluate the risks and repercussions of any individual action against its desired outcome, right? So, I mean, the hope would be that the courts have some significant separation from the powers of the government, and so there's no incentive for them to increase the powers of the government and allow governmental overreach. But it provides a basis for which for these mandates to be challenged.
Okay, but so like if somebody does have AIDS and they don't tell somebody, and that person makes decisions based on that, did that person have the right to know? What is there a public right to know? I mean, I can't imagine putting a big
on another's right to, I believe, life.
Right. So they did have so the privacy could be, yeah, so there would be intrusion into this person's privacy because they are endangering somebody else.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, not to go like too far into contract law, but I think that there is some legal precedent for a sexual relationship constituting a contract, and that there are certain elements of contract law that say if there's like some significant harm that is not reported to a signee, then all of the like the contract is null. And there are some lawyers who argue that that might mean that not reporting a known case of a sexually transmitted disease constitutes sexual assault.
So I mean, if we're saying a sexual relationship, sure, but in that thought process, if we're saying a sexual relationship equals a contract, is that the same thing you're saying when you have a sexual relationship and you become pregnant? Is that a contract to now raise a child? I think we're trying to get away from that idea, aren't we? So, it's interesting to think about. These are complicated matters. Is it any wonder that Congress is not doing a great job of addressing it?
Yeah, well, I mean, we got to figure out where the line is. But this is kind of the point of the Constitution: is that we hit these things that we believe are just moral imperatives, and do we think it is a moral imperative that somebody just can't be forced to give up their body for somebody else.
Yes. To me, yes. Yeah, I think it's crazy to force that, to giving up your body for somebody else. That should be a choice that you make
So
freely.
how do we draw that line with public safety?
How do you draw that line with public safety? I mean, bodily autonomy is complicated, right? Because you're talking about all manner of things. So vaccines can come into there. Different medical procedures could come into there. You know, hormone replacement therapy, trans rights, you know, all of this stuff is all related to your bodily autonomy. Yeah, being assaulted. It just, you know, it's complicated. That's why I'm saying bodily autonomy is a hard issue because it isn't a single thing. Same thing with privacy. Privacy isn't a single thing. And if I was even going to expand further on privacy, we could talk about, you know, surveillance and collecting information, because that is also connected to this issue right now around abortion, is the idea that some of these health departments need to be collecting data on you and your menstrual cycle to determine, oh my gosh, have you had an abortion or a miscarriage? In some of these states where they've got very restrictive laws about that right now. You know, it's like, what level of privacy and intrusion is okay? It seems crazy to me. Keeping track of what state I have entered. Are we not allowed to freely travel? Is my body not allowed to travel across state lines and get a procedure that is legal in that state? Am I not allowed to smoke pot there?
That's totally going to be overturned. There's no question. That's going to be that. I think that a lot has been made about these, you know, these ideas that have been thrown out by kooky fucking Republican legislatures. I mean, the period tracking one, it's like most people that use period tracking apps don't update them every period, right? So just somebody like accidentally missing logging a period is going to flag something, and it's going to create an entire precedent for if they ever tried to legally challenge that. Every woman that got an abortion would be like, I just mistracked my periods. Like,
Right, but they would, but would they force you to take a, you know, a pregnancy test? Would they force you to do, you know, X, Y, or Z? Because now you are a host to another human being who is now more important than you, the host. I don't know. It is curious, some of the things that are happening right now. Some of the things that are happening are weird, because I'm hearing about people who, you know, had appointments to get IUDs, right? So this is a person who's being responsible. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing with birth control. But now they can't get their IUD because the doctor is now afraid, because this particular state's laws are a little over the top, and doctors are the ones getting penalized. So now you can't get doctors to do the procedures. Or you do have an ectopic pregnancy, or you do have a medical condition that isn't related to pregnancy. Maybe it's a heart condition. It could be any number of things that makes carrying a child for you incredibly dangerous. And now a doctor is afraid to proceed in something that could keep you safe and protected, because how is it going to be seen by the courts that are not run by the medical profession? They're run by people with political agendas.
mm-hmm.
And it's endangering people. So
it is. Well, this is also the rollout of all these laws is just, there's just a lot of confusion, which I think is true whenever a landmark case
there is a lot of confusion.
Is that everything? I mean, I'll tell you, like, not to, you know, not to put my flag in the ground anywhere, but that New York gun law got overturned, and immediately someone in my household who has access to my computer by fingerprints started looking up how, you know, how this changes what you can do in terms of acquiring a gun. And the answer was, well, we don't know what the fuck is going on. All of that, all the websites were like, we understand this has been overturned. We're trying to figure out what the current situation is, but just because it's overturned doesn't mean that we like have a system in place. So we're all like, everyone's scrambling is the answer. And now there's a new gun law that's been passed, and again, it's been passed, and they're like, okay, well, what boards need to exist? Because what they passed is that you know, in order to get a concealed carry permit, you need 16 hours of training and 2 hours of shooting experience, and then to interview with your local sheriff. I think the interview is ridiculous, but I think the other thing is great. But the system doesn't immediately exist once one of these things are codified into law that verifies those 16 hours, right? These things need a second to build up. I don't know why I got onto this tangent, but
Because it's weird. Yeah, no, uh,
I just
I'm just,
want to start getting women guns, man. It's like that's all I want.
women do not have to do any tests for guns. They can just walk in and they get one free. But you know what? Then we also get into what is a woman, and is defining a woman even important in this conversation? Because for me, it's not. I feel like men should fall into this as well. I don't think it should just be about the woman. I think if a man doesn't want to be part of, the family unit, I think he has to have that right as well.
Totally.
So it's very complicated. And defining a woman is, I hate the way that they have been going about trying to define women lately, where they're saying, a person who menstruates. Again, that's nothing. I mean, plenty of women don't menstruate. They have, so
you're only a woman until you're like around 50. Like
exactly.
That's
or, am I not a woman if I had my uterus removed? Am I not a woman anymore? It's like all of this stuff it's a waste of time in my mind to try to define what a woman is. That's why it's like every individual should be able to opt out of the situation. They should be able to choose who they produce offspring with. And I think that's hard for me too, because what if a man doesn't want to produce offspring with this woman and she's pregnant? Is she now required to get an abortion?
I think there's okay. Well, ain't that the question, right? If a situation, we've gotten into this before a little bit, but if a world existed where the age of viability was like before you could tell that you were pregnant, right? Then I think that you could put a system in place in which if one of the two individuals wants the child, they get to pay for all the bullshit that it costs to make this child happen, right? And the other person can give up, can give up their rights and separate entirely from the situation.
Sure.
And in that case, it's perfect, right? But because that doesn't exist right now, I think that the best that you can offer to the man is, if you don't want the kid, then you can leave and you will have no right to see your child or anything. You have no parental rights at all. You have no rights to request to see your child. You have no right to attempt to contact them. You have no rights with this, but you also have no financial obligation to them if you make the decision before, I guess, the age of viability or something. Maybe that would, I can adjust on that timeline. What really sucks right now, and it's I guess it's small potatoes in comparison to the larger issue we're talking about, is that there are these men who believe that a child exists and then have no decision-making power, and then believe that their child is killed by the woman. That probably sucks, but I guess it's small potatoes in the large scale. So yeah, the man has no right to demand that the child is born unless a system exists that brings viability way early.
Right. Ugh. Or artificial wombs become a thing, right? And there's a way to extract the embryo from the woman. I don't think we don't have a way to do that either. We don't have a way to do that either. You can do that in a petri dish and put one in, but taking one out isn't something that we seem to be able to do yet, to my knowledge. So
no, not to my knowledge, and I don't think there's a ton of funding in it.
Which is interesting. So it does feel like if this is an important issue for men, if they feel like women have all of the decision-making power and they do feel like they've lost access to a potential child, then they should really be working on an alternative method for that to happen.
Let's be honest. The problem for men is rarely in that direction. It's that most men are concerned about the fact that they have to take care of children that they don't want. So, you know, and the men that would be just emotionally distraught in general with, their significant other having an abortion are likely not having sex with people that are likely to get abortions. So we do eliminate a lot of that happening.
Ooh, Ellie thinks that artificial wombs are pretty solid right now. But again, for an artificial womb, you can't get the embryo out of the woman and put it in the artificial womb, right? Because to me, that's the trick. You have to be able to get it out of her. Seems like we can only do it petri dish style and then put it into the womb. But I might be wrong. But I mean, I think it's an interesting solution for the rare cases where the man wants it but the woman does not. But then he can't go after her later and say, I thought you actually, I know you said you didn't want this, but I really thought you were going to take care of it. It's like, no, I said no, thanks. It's yours. It's your baby. So how do we, I don't know how we word any of this stuff. It is a fun discussion, but how would we word something like that?
Yeah, we've separated a little bit from the concept of the amendment, but I do think that we have a starting ground here, which is
We do.
enshrining the right to privacy, and then we're trying to find that line early. Now, the point of an amendment really is setting that baseline from which the courts will determine what reasonable is. And so there's a certain amount of responsibility that we shift onto the interpreters of the amendment, which is kind of nice. So I think if we can squeeze reasonable in there and then say that we can program in there are certain situations where bodily autonomy may not be the absolute number one, right? I mean, when it infringes on someone else's bodily autonomy, obviously, right?
Well, so
in the case where your bodily autonomy is going to kill people.
Sure. No, I get what you're saying. I think my concern is when we talk about infringing on somebody else's rights, some people would argue that, upon conception, that is a person. And so you doing these things is infringing on that potential person's life. So how do we define a person with rights? What is a person?
Well, one, that they think it's a person. I need to lay down to think about this.
Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, they think it's a person, and it has rights, and so you're infringing. Can you infringe on someone's rights by taking yourself out of the equation? I think that the whole point is that you can't be infringing on someone's rights by just subtracting yourself from a situation, right?
But how can you subtract yourself from a pregnancy?
The right to dependence. Well, I mean, that's what an abortion is, right?
Well, right, but then the other person is no longer with us, right? In that scenario, and they didn't really have a choice one way or the other. They didn't have a choice when they came into existence either. So,
I mean, the philosophical point is, we've made before, which is that you cannot have a choice to have some sort of a fatal disease that could be cured by an organ donation, or like a kidney transplant, right? But that doesn't mean that somebody else is infringing upon your rights by not giving you a kidney. You do not have some sovereign claim to the kidney of another person.
Okay.
So
I like that thinking.
This is, no one has a sovereign claim upon another individual's body to maintain their own life.
Ooh.
And
interesting.
Here's how I separate it from viruses, right? Is that a virus is something that you give to somebody else, right? It's in your body, and then you infringe upon their rights by giving them the virus. And if you had some reasonable means of preventing it and did not take that course of action, and reasonably knew that you had that, it's a different thing, right? It's the giving
Yeah.
the virus versus the somebody having something and them saying that they have a claim upon your body, right? Now, I realize the argument I've just opened myself up to, which is that, well, you gave the baby life. Fuck. Ugh.
This is why we're workshopping, so that we can
Workshopping.
find all of these potential holes and try to sew them up. But we are hitting an hour, and I know that you have other things happening today.
Yeah.
So I think that we can just call this is our opening workshop, and maybe we will workshop again in a couple of days.
We'll keep working on it. Everyone, do your homework and bring your thoughts to class next time,
Yep.
and we'll get through it.
Absolutely. And if you guys could also, if you do have some good ideas or some interesting thoughts or just questions that, it might be fun to discuss, you can just drop it in the comments under this video, and we might discuss those, as we start our next one.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you weren't able to see the show live, that doesn't mean that you can't interact with the show. So please drop a comment, drop a like, hit that notification bell, and all the other things that real YouTubers say.
Yep. And yeah, hopefully we get this to start to solidify. I mean, I think we have a good groundwork, but I definitely need some tweaking. But I'm excited.
Yep. We will get there.
We will get there. All right, so everybody, I'd like you guys to all go enjoy your 4th of July. Let's celebrate the illusion of freedom in the hopes that we might actually get it back someday through projects and workshops like we're doing right now. All right. Thanks for keeping us company. And should we sing out?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, let's see. Let's do it. Shabadoo. Ooh. I'm the kid that's on the country. I'm a Yankee who rode and I'm a real my name and remember, just like Mr. Doodle did, but I ain't got a pony. Oh, okay. All right. Bye.